surely is that sinking feeling yet again in Mumbai. Life came to a standstill in the country's financial capital after heavy rains disrupted rail and road traffic. Even as low-lying areas were flooded, suburban train services on the western, central and the harbour lines, that's the lifeline of the maximum city, came to a grinding halt, while the Bandra-Worli sea link was closed to traffic due to poor visibility. Thousands of people remained stranded at their work, although many offices issued advisories asking their employees not to venture out. And the Met Department says heavy rains could continue in the next 48 hours.
The floods in Mumbai has once again exposed the tall claims of the BMC, the richest municipality in the country. It also shows how underprepared the local authorities are in dealing with such eventualities. Many point out that there was not even a warning from the BMC, while rescue efforts were limited to setting up control rooms. From a municipal corporation which collects over 400 crore rupees in tax, this is simply unacceptable. Life at a standstill in Mumbai thanks to the indifferent attitude of authorities. Let's get you a ground report before we head into the India development debate this Tuesday evening.
One part of central Mumbai, and it is 6 p.m. Now, and we can see water everywhere. There is traffic stranded over here near Kamla Mills. We would like to speak to a few commuters who have been trying to get to their home. आप कितने देर से रुके हैं यहाँ पे? कितने देर से फंसे हुए हैं आप? 45 minutes. अब आप जैसे निकले, घर से निकले, कितना टाइम लगा यहाँ तक पहुँचने के लिए?
सर मैं निकला पेडर रोड से निकला हूँ सर. लगभग पौने 2 घंटे हो गया.
We would like to speak to some other commuters as well. We would like to speak to some other commuters. आप कितने देर से रुके हैं यहाँ पे?
अरे कम से कम 2 घंटे तो हो गए.
आप कभी निकले थे और कैसा लगता है मुंबई के रास्ते का हाल कैसा है अभी?
अरे हाल तो बहुत बेहाल है.
मतलब किसको ब्लेम करेंगे, किसकी जिम्मेदारी बनती है, आपको क्या लगता है?
अरे अभी बॉम्बे की जो है मेन उन्हीं की जिम्मेदारी बनती है.
Trying to get in touch with the BMC hotline number, and you just saw me calling them 3 times and still we couldn't connect to them. Well, this is one of the problems that people are facing. They are not able to get in touch with the BMC officials through the hotline numbers provided to them. This is one of the problems that people are facing in Bombay during the rains.
The damage has been more in the suburbs. On the western line, it is beyond Matunga Road station is where the flooding is occurring, and on the central line, it is beyond Sion is where the flooding is occurring. And both the Western Express Highway and the Eastern Express Highway, both of them have actually been inundated with traffic and water. So deadly combination there, and the trains have also mostly been suspended. So even if we are seeing these people going towards Churchgate station, every second moment we are seeing someone or the other moving. But because the western line has completely been jammed, so we don't really know whether these people will be able to find commute back home.
Rains have created havoc in Mumbai city. This is again Prabha Devi over here, and this is a tree that has been uprooted 2 hours back, as what I've been told by the people over here. The tree was uprooted 2 hours back, and 2 people were injured when the tree fell down. Well, a lot of people over here you can see a lot. The tree is fallen over here. This is the Century Bazaar lane, and this is the havoc created by the monsoons in Bombay.
In a coastal city, when there is a high tide and heavy pressure of rains, then it is very difficult to evacuate water. So all the precautions have been taken, all deployments were done. So it's not the case, but yes, still people are facing problems due to the waterlogging is a truth, and that is because as of now all the pumps of BMC of water evacuation are working, but still there are certain areas where there is no proper system of evacuation, which is actually planned by BMC, and they are in phase of building the capability. We should refrain from blame game right now. The situation is that we need to help the people. Let us focus on that only. Afterwards, we can really look into it. What is the problem? Where there is waterlogging, and what are the issues which have been happening. So as of now, I think I would like to concentrate more on helping people, on advising people, on making our advisories reach the people. Fortunately, due to our CCTV network, we are able to give localized advisories. So they are not just generic, but we can also give localized advisories. So we are trying to give it, and media people like you are also, all the media are helping us to make our advisories reach to the people. So I think let us focus on that. Subsequently, we can also speak on other issues.
All right, and now we turn focus from one infrastructure disaster to another. And while rain can be nature's fury, this one is entirely man-made. 70 years after independence, it's a pity that railways that was once considered the lifeline of this country is increasingly synonymous with killer tracks. A third derailment today in under 10 days raises the big question: where does the buck stop?
The Modi government came in with a big appetite to reform railways, but seems to have now lost steam. Political will has dwindled because nothing else explains why the very pragmatic and forward-looking Vivek Debroy panel's recommendations that suggested private sector plying trains have not been endorsed. We strongly believe that a developing India doesn't just need a railway system that's safe and reliable, but also one that is self-sustaining and profitable. On the India development debate this evening, we will discuss the sorry state of affairs and what will it take to reboot the Indian railways.
For a government aiming to run bullet trains in the country, the incidents over the course of the past few weeks throw up some rather compelling questions. India's largest carrier of passenger and goods has been shaken by a series of accidents which happened in quick succession over the past 10 days. 7 coaches along with the engine of the Nagpur-Mumbai-Toronto Express derailed on Tuesday morning near Maharashtra's Thane district. This is the third major train accident over the past 2 weeks. While no casualties or injuries were reported, it is believed that a landslide and heavy rains breached the tracks in the Kasara Ghats area. The latest accident has pushed up the tally of major accidents this year. About a week ago, Kaifiyat Express derailed in Auraiya district in UP, injuring over 100 people. And on August 20th, at least 23 people were killed and over 72 were injured after Utkal Express ran off the tracks in UP's Muzaffarnagar district. These back-to-back accidents have led to a massive rejig in the railways. After the resignation of A.K. Mittal as the Railway Board Chairman, Ashwani Lohani is the new man at the helm of affairs. Even Railway Minister Suresh Prabhu offered his resignation to the PM, taking moral responsibility for the accidents. The Modi government has embarked upon a massive mission to reform the railways, be it dynamic fares or the involvement of private players in station development. But the recent accidents show that basic safety is still a major concern in India. ET Now, New Delhi.
And we've got a power-packed lineup joining us on the India development debate this evening. Dinesh Trivedi, former Railway Minister, Maithili Bushnurmat, consulting editor, ET Now, Seshadri Chari of the BJP. We've also got Kishore Desai, OSD at the Niti Aayog, someone who understands the railway sector very closely. Also joined on the show this evening, Gurcharan Das, author, commentator, former CEO of PNG India, and a part of that crucial committee that came up with reforms, suggestions for the railways. All of you, thank you so much for taking time out and joining us on the India development debate this evening. I'm going to start off with you, Mr. Trivedi, if we've got you on the phone line. All right, I think we'll connect with Dinesh Trivedi in just a bit, but let me start off with Gurcharan Das. Tell us, Gurcharan Das, 3 accidents in 10 days, 3 rail accidents in 10 days, and the record has been pretty poor of late. Who is to be blamed? Where does the buck stop?
Well, I think the blame goes to the whole structure of the Indian Railways. And the fact is that today there should be no railways ministry, no railway budget. They've already done that. The third thing is the railway ministry should be part of a transport ministry, and the job of the ministry should only be a broad policy and not the running of trains. In addition, there should be a regulator. The safety should be part of the regulator's mandate. And if we have that, then I think the chances of these accidents will definitely reduce. The other aspect of the railways ultimately is, the problem ultimately goes to the fact that we have a monopoly. We have a government monopoly which is overmanned and inefficient and lacks capacity. And so what we need to do is to try and create competition. And you can do that by separating railways into two companies. One is a company responsible for rail track, infrastructure, railway stations, and the other one is a company that runs trains in competition with private sector trains.
No, I do appreciate your answer, and I do get from where it's coming. This is a part of the recommendations that you've said, very pragmatic. I do not understand why they're not being endorsed, and we'll go and dwell upon that in just a bit. But Maitri, I have two questions for you. A, obviously, who's responsible for all these derailments? 3 in 10 days, there's got to be somebody who's accountable and answerable. I mean, I don't think the minister alone can say, I will quit on moral grounds. But I think the second question, and just to take a cue from what Mr. Gurucharan Das was saying, that railways is overmanned and it's inefficient, I don't think we can, disagree with that at all. But if you look at figures, one of the obvious glaring issues is shortage of staff. There are 1.2 lakh vacancies in Indian Railways, and this is especially in the safety staff. Why are they not being filled? What are we waiting for? Is human life so inconsequential that accidents after accidents can happen and there is going to be no accountability?
Well, Supriya, two things, because I think whenever we talk of accidents, we need to distinguish between two kinds of accidents. One, those that are caused by human error or negligence, of which the first one in Oria was definitely a case of human negligence. The other is because of lack of safety equipment, lack of improvement in the tracks, lack of anti-collision devices, all of which costs money. And mind you, the Anil Kakodkar committee had way back in 2012 suggested that we set up a Rashtriya Rail Sanrakshak Kosh, but that never happened. They wanted 1 lakh crore rupees. And this budget set aside just 20,000 crores. And even that was very difficult for the railway minister to find, simply because our railways are hugely subsidized. Nobody wants to pay. Bombay suburban trains, we're talking about Bombay today, and how the trains have come to a standstill and they're a lifeline of Bombay. But the fact remains that the train fare covers barely 30%, 35% of the cost. So until such time as we are willing to pay and run our railways as commercial propositions, where the railways generate sufficient revenue to set aside that kind of money that is needed for safety measures. About a third of the accidents of the country are caused because of unmanned railway crossings, and we are not going to be able to eliminate them. The target is only till 2020, simply because we don't have the money. So I think it's important to distinguish between the two, what is caused by human negligence and error, and what is caused simply because by the fact that we don't have the money to set up these kind of safety devices. And why don't we have the money? Because we're not able to charge. And here, this is where the political economy question comes in. Yes, government doesn't have the gumption, government doesn't have the spine to force through these price hikes, and let us also accept that as citizens, we also are not prepared to pay. Every time the railway ministry, in fact under Mr. Dinesh Trivedi itself, when they raised the fares, immediately there were hartals all over the country. You tried raising the fares in Bombay, people call on strike. So there is, yes, some of the onus or responsibilities with the government, and some, let us look inward, remains with us as citizens also, Supriya.
Oh, couldn't agree more with you, Maitri. Thank you for setting the context for this conversation. And Dinesh Trivedi, of course, joins us on the phone line. He was one of the, we would call him should have been popular railway minister, but many may say wasn't so popular because he defied his party directive and hiked tariffs at a time when he needed to. Mr. Trivedi, coming on the point that Maitri was speaking, our estimate is about 25,000 crores is the knock that we're taking on account of not linking, tariffs to market rates. How long is this sustainable, and does that in a sense explain the main root cause of unviability of Indian railways?
See, I must tell you, the root cause, as I have seen, is not understanding how strong our railway system is and how talented people are in the railways. We have used railways politically. So there are two areas. One is the solid infrastructure and other is the running operation. So unless and until you have a solid, safe infrastructure, there is no reason why you should run the trains. And we are used to defooling the people, not telling them what exactly is the ailment.
We are used to not telling people what the reality is, but I'm going to take this question to your political cousins on this show, and I've got Seshadri Chari and Anil Singh Boparai from the Congress party. Mr. Chari, of course, represents the ruling benches, and Mr. Chari, I'm going to point out a parliamentary panel on Indian Railways that very recently counselled the government to not consider the national transporter as a commercial undertaking. Is that the root cause of the problem? I mean, Indian Railways, for all practical purposes, should be treated as a commercial entity. It should be in the business of making profits. It should run a self-sustaining business. But instead, just like our public sector banks, it becomes this vehicle of social development. And is that the mindset that is the root cause of all ills that plague the Indian Railways? Mr. Chari.
See, railway is always considered as a public utility service. And I think looking at the developmental aspect of railway and the lack of development, and also about the profit and loss making systems of the railway, only in the background of say 3 accidents in 10 days or the disruption of the services in Mumbai because of heavy rains, will be doing a great injustice to the entire debate on developmental aspects of India as well as developmental aspect of railways itself. So I think we will have to look at railway as an independent entity. As far as the commercialization of the railway service is concerned, there have been attempts earlier on the same subject in other countries also. For example, if you look at the railway services, commercialization of railway services in UK or the commercialization of Amtrak, they did not succeed. Finally, the Amtrak was sold back to the New York City. The government took over, and same is the case with UK also. So mere commercialization or bringing in this kind of a commercial mindset will not stop accidents, and it will not be a very profitable venture. For example, if you see the metro service in Delhi, right, after the price hike of the tickets, the metro services have lost out, and 1.5 lakh passengers dropped out of the service. Now this is going to have a bearing on the road traffic, this is going to have a bearing on the taxi services, this is also going to have a bearing on the bus service, which is in a very bad shape as far as Delhi city is concerned. As far as Mumbai is concerned, I think there has to be a series of actions as far as the railway service is concerned. We are also talking about suburban services in Mumbai, or probably for that matter any other suburban services. Mumbai is the only city which has the maximum suburban service. I think the Mumbai suburban service, railway service, can be handed over to Mumbai Metro Rail Corporation, and they are able to handle it better by controlling the entry and exit routes. Right. So these are all some of the things that we can fix up. Right. But broadly speaking, right, I would suggest there are 4 areas, broadly speaking. One is the services, right, one is the recruitment, right, third is the investment, and fourth is the safety.
All right. We will touch upon these 4 issues, and I do want to talk about the recommendations made by the Bibek Debroy committee, which I don't know why the government is not moving on, at least on the contentious issues. But let me get a word from Adil Singh Boparai, joins us from the Congress party. You know, we've been studying the numbers very closely, and while the NDA government deserves some stick for the, and you know, will take the blame for the spate of recent accidents, but when it comes to investment in railway infrastructure, they've actually done better than the UPA. You know, they've invested 54,000 crore in rail infra as against 34,000 odd crores on average by UPA in a year. You know, railway safety expenditure has gone up from 42,000 to 65,000 crores. So some of the problems that we're facing today is because there hasn't been sufficient investment in railway networks over the years. Would you agree on that, Mr. Adil Singh Boparai?
Well, firstly, Sandeep, I think what's clearly lacking in this country today is political accountability. Now, in the past 3 years, despite over 340 rail accidents, over 600 lives have been lost, over 1,000 have been grievously injured. Despite all that, Mr. Suresh Prabhu continues as the rail minister. And what we saw a few days back was a charade. Why I call it a charade was because his resignation should have been accepted. If he did indeed wanted to resign, then his resignation should have been accepted and political accountability fixed. That's point number one. Point number two, in the year 2016-17, the rail accidents have been the highest in the past decade. Now, these are statistics coming from the government. These are not figures from the Congress party, which demonstrates that railway safety is nowhere on the priority chart of this government. What you really need in this country today is more than a Twitter-friendly rail minister who's all the time busy with propaganda exercises and showmanship. You need somebody who can really focus on railway safety, because human lives matter. Indian citizens and their lives matter. It is critical. Railway safety, I would say, is the foremost priority of the rail minister in this country. Now, let me share some statistics. In fact, Supriya shared it earlier. Over 1.2 lakh posts in Group C and Group D category of the railway cadre are unfilled. Now, if this government is really advocated or dedicated 1 lakh crore towards rail safety, why haven't those posts been...
That's a question I will put forward to... Yes,
on those posts?
Anil Singh
I have
Bopara.
another point. Supriya, I have another point.
Sorry, Adil.
I have another point. Please, let me complete.
Go ahead, Adil.
The second point which I want to make is, now let's take Utkal Express as a case in point. You know, that tragedy could have been clearly averted had there been better coordination. Railway line was under construction. Had there been better coordination and better two-way communication, we could have saved lives. But what happened? In the past 10 days, in spite of that extremely unfortunate tragedy, we've had 2 more incidents. And the rail minister continues. And you know, the problem with this government is, you know, what I call the 3D. This is the 3D Sarkar of deceit, divide and derailment. Despite their lofty claims of New India, it's a tragedy.
You have to hold your thoughts there, and I'm going to come back to acronyms. I thought acronyms were best coming in from the BJP, but it looks like the Congress has its own set of acronyms to expand on as well. I will come to you, and I promise you on that point. But let me get a little bit of a nuanced technical view on this. Kishore Trivedi, the Rail Ministry claims it has invested 54,000 crores in rail infra as against 34,000 crores that was being spent by the UPA. Rail safety expenditure has gone up from 42,000 to 65,000 crore rupees. Where is this money going? Because accident after accidents seem to belie the fact that there is more fund being put in. Where on earth is this money going? Mr. Desai?
So let me, I understand the point, but let me quickly set the context. So if you see in 2011, when the government, in fact, Mr. Dinesh Trivedi was the Minister of Railways then, so the government set up Anil Kakotkar committee. The brief of Anil Kakotkar committee was, they had suggested item-wise suggestions related to technology and what steps need to be taken to solve the safety problem. Clearly, safety is has always been a priority for any government, including this government. The basic aim was to ensure that we reach a situation where accidents minimize. So there were 4 steps essentially involved. One, to understand where the problems lie. Once you understand the problem, then to identify those activities or those steps that need to be taken to ensure that accidents do not happen or accidents get minimized. And third, to identify the various enabling pillars. So meaning, if somebody has identified, if the expert committees have identified a list of actions, then who is responsible for implementing them, how do you raise funding, etc., etc. So the first 2 activities, meaning diagnosis of the problem and identification of solutions, has already happened. Anil Kakotkar committee had suggested an investment of about 1 lakh crores in 2011. When the new government joined, they set up an internal committee which comprised of senior officials of the railway board. They analyzed the recommendations of Anil Kakotkar's committee, and they added the existing operating conditions, and based on their overall analysis, they suggested that the railways for safety would need an investment of about 1,54,000 crore. So discussions happened between Ministry of Railways and Ministry of Finance, and the result of which essentially led to a setting up of a railway safety fund, which is about 1 lakh crore. Now you mentioned two figures that overall you see, so the railway safety investments have been going, but you see the problem is there have been a list of activities that have been identified. So despite increase in investments over the last few years, the deficit, the legacy deficits have not been taken care of, and it is happening gradually, and it will take some time, maybe 2 to 3 years from now, to actually invest in all the activities that have been identified earlier.
All right, fair enough, point noted. I want to toss it now to Dinesh Trivedi. The representative from Congress made a case for the resignation of the railway minister. While we are critical of the fact that we haven't seen enough reform, enough progress in reform in the railway department, I'm asking tonight, what is the need for, what is the objective that is going to be served by the railway minister resign? Every time these accidents happen, railway ministers claim moral responsibility. You've been one yourself. Is there any solution? Is there any objective that will be served by Suresh Prabhu stepping down as a railway minister, or do we need him because he's seen as one of the more competent, efficient, ministers in this government? Do we need him to steady the ship and implement those reforms and those recommendations that are lying in his table? Mr. Trivedi, what is your own view?
My view is very simple. We are competent. Railway is one of the best organizations in the world. We can fix it. But if we do not change our approach, I am not interested whether it was UPA, NDA, these are all useless talks. Fact of the matter is, I know a little about the railways, and it can be fixed, provided you change the entire approach to the railways. If the railway is not safe, I will not run a single train. And I will tell the public that I'm sorry. I am not confident, I cannot run the train. The minimum thing has to be safety. If you and I are traveling, we need to understand it is 100% safe. All the accidents which are taking place today, and maybe during other times also, it is all avoidable. Accidents are at the moment man-made. This all could have been avoided. I'm not talking about my time or their time, all the time to come. And the entire emphasis has to be changed. For heaven's sake, change the approach towards the railway. Don't treat the railways like the Britishers treated. My approach was, if Japan has no death in last 50 years on the high speed, we are capable. If we are capable for Chandrayaan, you mean to say we can't run a safe airline? Look at aviation today. It is so safe because you have to maintain international protocols. We do not maintain any protocol because we want to have quick fix.
That's a fair point indeed. We need to have a quick fix. There are fewer accidents in aviation.
We have to please understand, today the basic structure of the railway is totally destabilized. Totally destabilized. First of all, get the railway structure solidly in place, and we can do it. I guarantee you we can do it. But do we want to do it? I don't have the answer. Sometimes I feel we don't want to do it because the lives in India, especially of the poor, means nothing.
Actually, that's a valid point, and I think I'm going to spend some amount of time talking about that. But Seshadri Chari, I'm going to ask you, when the government came in, when Mr. Modi did come into power, he went after the railways with a lot of gusto. There was a lot of, maneuvering towards reforming the railways. Suresh Prabhu was brought in. He was a technocrat of sorts. And look at where it is today. It looks like, just from an outsider's perspective, that steam has been lost. When they talked about privatization of railways, they were looking at getting in private sector operators to ply trains. And then, of course, there was the step back and said railways will never be privatized, at least the core activity. So it looks like the political will somewhere kind of got missing. Will you deny that, or will you be candid enough to admit that, yes, that steam has been lost?
I don't think...
The will to reform railways.
No, I strongly deny this point. There is absolutely no dearth of political willpower as far as the railways are concerned, or even looking at the safety aspects of the railway is concerned. And I don't want to join issues with my Congress representative on the panel. Instead of ranting about what has been done and all these things, I think Indian Railways have had probably one or two very good railway ministers. Mr. Dinesh Trivedi is one of them, who was an excellent railway minister who wanted really to do a lot of changeover. Mr. Prabhu again is one of the best ministers and one of the best railway ministers at that, who can look into issues and also tackle the problems. But there is no dearth of any political willpower as far as changing over all these things are concerned. But there are issues, and I think we will have to sit and work out those issues. Safety is one of the most important aspects. You are saying, I mean, your channel is now showing that 50% of the accidents are due to human error. But I have read somewhere it is not just 50, it is much more than 50, as much as 80% of the human error accounts for accidents. If that is the case, I think we will have to look into the human error aspect even more. But merely transforming all these services into a technology mode also does not rule out the possibility of freak accidents. But of course, they may come down. We could probably bring down the rate of accidents. And most of the accidents that are caused in cities like Mumbai are more due to the overcrowding of trains and also people crossing the track at the wrong place and the wrong time.
Sure.
So simple technologies can prevent almost 60 to 70% of the accidents.
Okay.
So these technologies will have to be brought in, and these technologies are not costly.
Absolutely.
They are not cryogenic engine technologies. We can easily handle the situation.
All right, point noted, Seshadri Chari. I would say it's a pity that we still have unmanned rail crossings in this country, and the government now hopes to have no unmanned railway crossings only in the year 2019. That itself is a sad state of affairs. But let's shift the conversation away from security issues to talk about broader railway reforms, and let's get down to specifics. Maithili, the Bibek Debroy committee came out with a set of far-reaching recommendations. Some of them, the easy ones, have been, sort of implemented by the government, whether it is setting up of a regulator, doing away with the railway budget. But the contentious ones, Maithili, which is on the role of allowing private sector, having a holding company that will look after sort of tracks in a more neutral manner. So the contentious recommendations, doing away. Okay, I think we've lost the link with Maithili. But let me toss it to Gurcharan Das, who was part of that committee that submitted those recommendations, making a case for private sector to enter the railways. Mr. Das, tell us, why do you think that would have been a game-changing move? And also, how do you see the private sector investing in plying trains when the tracks themselves are now are not available, right? Indian Railways would have monopoly over tracks. So, what was the way this could have been done, Mr. Gurcharan Das?
Yeah. So, therefore, this whole process should, we are building rail corridors, freight corridors. Once those freight corridors are built, there will be a much greater capacity available in the system. Secondly, the railways is double lining a lot of the tracks. Now, by double lining, you will be doubling capacity. So, you're absolutely right that we need to expand capacity, but this capacity will come on not very far away, and when it comes on, you should then be ready to have a regulator, because to have private access you need a regulator, because otherwise if you give it to the job of the Indian Railways to become the regulator, they will never give the private sector a chance. So, you need an independent regulator to allow for free, fair access and competition. Now, yeah, go ahead.
No, I was actually just taking it to Maithili as well. And Maithili, the point that Sandeep was making, and we lost your line there. The set of recommendations that have come in, some of them are very pragmatic. The government has moved to accounting the way this panel has recommended. The government has aborted a railway budget. Our regulators are very much there. I am really trying to ask you, how feasible is it for the recommendation that will perhaps be most game-changing, which is to have a holding company, which is to split railways? Let's have a holding company which was going to manage infrastructure and tracks, and another part of railways that will compete with the private sector to ply trains, whether it's passenger or freight trains.
Well, Supriya, if you go by worldwide experience, particularly the UK, because the UK was one of the first to try and privatize British Rail, and the experiment just didn't work. So most countries, frankly, railways are a monopoly. It is the very nature of the business that the railways are a monopoly. You can try splitting it up and having rolling stock owned by one party and the basic track owned by the government, as it were, but somehow it hasn't been very successful. So a holding company is really not the answer. To my mind, the answer is to have an independent regulator. We have a tariff regulator only on paper. The tariff regulator has virtually no powers, and the fares are all decided politically. In fact, and I'm quoting from the paper written by Bibek Deb Roy and Kishore Desai, whom we have with us, and it says very clearly, it says that the railway budgets over a period of time have become political platforms for popular announcements, and this in turn has impacted Indian Railways, and this is really the bottom line, because over the years the railways have been used only for political ends. So Mr. Prabhu has been very different, Mr. Trivedi also was very different, I must say, but historically most railway ministers have just used it to feather their own nest, as it were. All trains almost going to the constituency of the railway minister. It didn't matter whether it was Jafar Sharif or Ghani Khan Chaudhary or Lalu Prasad. So it was always being used as a political animal. And if you mix up commercial and socio-political objectives, this is what you're going to get. So I think it's important to realize that today in India, rail fares are way below comparable fares anywhere else in the world. Look at what Amtrak charges and look at what we pay for Indian Railways. We cannot continue with this kind of subsidy. And what is surprising is that the Modi government, which is pretty sure about wanting to do away with subsidies in a whole host of areas and has been remarkably bold, I must say, somehow seems very hesitant to touch railway fares. At least if you could say, okay, it has to be indexed to, say, at the very least inflation, it would solve a lot of problems. But till such time as we look at railway fares through a political lens, I am afraid things will never improve.
Kishore Desai, come in there. Maithili was referring to a report in which you contributed as well. The fact that the issue is that railway fares are continue to be looked at through a political lens. What's your own sense? What's the way out of this then? How do we sort of convince the political class to look at railways as a commercial establishment?
In fact, I would like to state that the government has already made a beginning in that. So recently we had written a report. So what we did was we calculated the total social cost obligations for railway. So if you see, one of the major costs that railways incur essentially is because of the social services that they end up providing. There are various types of subsidies. For example, if you are a senior citizen, then you are entitled to 50% subsidy. There are sports people who are entitled to certain subsidies. They operate various types of unremunerative lines. The net effect of all these social services is that railways on an average lose about 40 to 45,000 crore rupees every year, and that's a massive loss that they incur. So, either the solution is that either we increase the fares to a significant level so that, they recover the entire losses. The second solution is how do we tackle this problem? So, a lot of people who do not deserve subsidies are still entitled. So, for example, not every senior citizen, there are senior citizens who are earning reasonably well, but every senior citizens are entitled to the subsidy. So, how do we tackle this problem? So, government is taking a piecemeal, has started that approach. So, they are identifying various avenues through which, those subsidies that are being given currently are minimized, are either done away completely. They are also trying to see whether we can use Aadhaar to track actually the people who are using subsidies, and how do we, some sort of a DBT mechanism could be implemented for railways also. In freight, the second problem is, because of the under recoveries in passenger, governments end up overcharging freight. So how do we sort of balance this system? So things are under process. There is a railway tariff authority also being set up. Although it's currently not functional that way. But all these levers are currently in place. Once they start functioning properly, I think a lot of problem will get solved. It won't be solved entirely. As I said, there are legacy issues, and 40,000 crore cannot be recovered immediately in the next 2 or 3 years, but a process has been made, has been started.
It really boils down to that moot question. Is railways a commercial entity and should it be doing cutthroat business, or is it really a vehicle of social development and social empowerment? But I think on that note, we'll take a quick break because there are many questions that I do want to come back and ask the politicians on this show. And we're going to do that in just a bit. So time for a quick breather here on the India Development Debate. We're back in a moment. Right, it's good to be back with you once again on the India Development Debate. And like we said, it's time to put the spotlight on the politicians on the show. And let me just begin with Adil Singh Boparai. Adil, you know, the point that Kishore Desai made, that there is a lot of subsidy in Indian Railways that goes to senior citizens, various categories of concessions that there is, and then the whole question of railways being in a whole host of businesses that actually it has no business to be in. Why should railways have a separate security force? Why should railways be running hospitals? Why should railways have schools? Because if you take away all of those functions that railways does, then railways does have an operating profit. It's only incurring losses when you put all those functions in the functions of its core activities. So my question really is, and it has happened over the years, a large part of it has happened when your party has been in power. Is it time, and will the Congress party be supportive in the fact that the railways needs to stop being the social development vehicle? It needs to stop giving these concessions. It needs to stop running schools and hospitals and having its own security force.
Supriya, I think it's extremely important that we can't overlook the social reality of this country. And railway still continues to remain one of the major modes of transport for a majority of our countrymen. That's point number one. Point number two, it's not that this government is not raising resources. This government has hiked rail fares by over 50%. This government brought in surge pricing. This government has doubled platform tickets. This government has dedicated and allocated close to 1 lakh crore rupees towards rail safety. But the critical question which the entire country today is asking is that despite raising such resources, despite taxing the common man to such an extent, we do not see any improvement in the railways. So people are asking, where's the money going? That's the point. If rail safety cannot be ensured, if tomorrow you're getting on a train and you don't know whether you're going to reach safely, I think that's a huge blot on the government's performance. And now just to borrow the BJP spokesperson was complimenting Mr. Prabhu, I would say number one, he's 3 years into his ministry. And we must see his performance on objective parameters. In 2016 to 2017, we've had the highest number of deaths due to rail accidents. Now, despite such dismal and unfortunate figures, the BJP complimenting Mr. Prabhu, I think, is indeed unfortunate. Here is a rail minister who's miserably failed. And the BJP, the party as a whole, needs to realize that theatrics and showmanship can never be a substitute to governance. That's I think the problem with this government is that this government is suffering from misplaced priorities. They're focusing too much on propaganda and less on governance.
Okay, Adil Singh Boparai, you're saying misplaced priorities, but you know, I don't want this discussion on rebooting railways to be hijacked by political sort of considerations. You know, Seshad Vichari, a more specific question, which is on the Bibek Debroy committee. Maithili spoke about it shortly. We had Mr. Kishore Desai talk about it as well. You understand the political pulse better. You say there is political will to reform railways. This is a committee that was constituted, that was chaired by, you know, someone, an economist of this government, member of the Niti Aayog, and some of those recommendations have been taken. Will the government move? You know, the report categorically says that the government needs to relook at some of the activities of railways outside of the core functions. A lot of these non-core activities, does it need to be there? It has suggested alternate mechanisms for each of them. For example, schools, they should probably be merged with Kendriya Vidyalayas. They've given specific recommendations on each of those issues. Will the government move on these issues, or because of political considerations, or because of the fact that that it might upset a political constituency, will the government hold back? That is what we want to hear from you, Mr. Chari.
I think it will be absolutely belittling the whole thrust of the debate by merely saying that this government is responsible for all the accidents that have taken place in the last 70 years, as if this government comes into power and then we end up with all these accidents. I mean, it is absolutely foolish to say that you enter a railway train and you don't know if you are going to really reach safely. The same thing, I get the same feeling when I enter an aeroplane. I don't know whether I am going to land safely. So that does not mean that we have to junk all the planes and then go by bullock carts. So it will be absolutely very childish to talk in these terms. But suffice to say, it's not that only because we are extending some concessions to senior citizens that we are ending up into losses. For example, even if you have been an MP for only 13 days, a member of parliament who was there only for 13 days as member enjoys free rail service for the whole life. Why do we do this? We are paying 15,000 rupees as telephone expense to all the MPs, where you can get 350 rupees, unlimited download and free phone calls. Why do you have to pay 15,000 rupees per month to all the members of parliament for the whole life? So it's not that you are just trying to save a penny and spend a dollar. It's not this kind of a situation. I think we will have to look at the broader issues. What we need is more investment, and more investments can come, and it need not be privatized. For example, there are innumerable, more than 800 to 1000 railway stations in India which can tap solar electricity, solar power, and this solar power can also be transferred to batteries and solar chips. And all the internal services of the train can be run on the battery, thereby we can save on the diesel. Even procurement of diesel also, the system of procurement of diesel for railway trains can also be changed. There are minor things that can be changed, and I wish the Vivek Debroy committee would have gone into these broader details rather than going into the detail of privatizing the railway service, which was never successful in any country. And there is a social responsibility for any government, be it Congress government or be it the BJP government. Everybody has to look into the social responsibility factor. And remember, railway is probably the only service in this country which is paying more pension than salary.
Sure.
They are paying more pension than salary, which means for 70 years we have been just putting people after people after people in the railways, and today we have a situation when we have stopped recruiting. There is a huge HR problem.
I understand that, and I think HR problems and processes is another recommendation of that committee. But I think I've got Dinesh Trivedi back on the line with me. Mr. Trivedi, you know, you've been in that hot seat. You defied a party line to do what you thought was the right thing to do at that point in time. I'm just asking you, as a railway minister, as somebody who's headed the Indian Railways, don't you believe some of what Railways does is absolutely inconsequential stuff? They don't need to do that. They don't need to run these schools. They don't need to run these hospitals. Why should Railways have its own security staff? You know, why on earth should Railways be making concessions for various categories? Mr. Sheshadri Chari is absolutely right. A member of parliament for 20 days has a lifelong free pass by the Indian Railways. Why should all of this happen? Is that, and that is where I'm saying, is that political will? Is that political courage? And that's what things boil down to do away with those.
See, the issue we are talking about is privatization. So let me tell you what you're talking, whether you give passes or you don't give passes. This is a very small fraction of the entire investment. First of all, why should a private sector come and invest if there is no revenue model? We had also the freight, which was partially the goods train, that's also not working. So here is what I had in mind. Basic infrastructure, the tracks, the signaling, the platforms, all which is operationally required has to be built by the government everywhere in the world, like the highways and the roadways and the bridges. What can be privatized is perhaps the infrastructure of railway stations, which is beyond the platforms. Secondly, what can be privatized is, after you have built the infrastructure, is operation of the trains, like the high-speed trains of Japan. There are 5 private companies running 5 different routes, but the basic infrastructure on which the private sector is running is built by the government, like the airports, like the runways. So that's why I said your basic approach towards the railway is wrong. And at the moment, the way you are approaching the railway, you can never ever run the system safely. So that is why I said in the beginning, let's not talk about BJP or Congress or this government or that government. Let's change the approach. And unfortunately, governments become so arrogant that they don't want to listen to people who may have to add something. So I can tell you, again I will repeat, the basic knowledge of the Indian Railways people is fantastic. Organization is still in the place, nothing much has happened. But we need to change the approach, and we need to have an Indian approach, and we don't have to go to the British approach. You will be surprised to know, and I have always fought with this. You know what is the basic definition of Indian railway organization. It says that Indian Railway Organization is a commercial entity and you don't do any work which really defines your organization. First of all, it cannot be a commercial. The operation could be commercial, but the basic infrastructure has to be built by the government, and it will give you indirectly add to 2 and 2.5% to the GDP, like the roadways, like the airways, like the port, and that is where I think the governments have not understood.
Right. I think the backward linkages on account of the Indian Railways is significant, and that's something that needs to be tapped into. I am running out of time, but I do want to get a quick comment from Kishore Desai as well. You know, people talk of misplaced priorities. You know, Mr. Desai, if you were to talk to a man on the street, he'd tell you, what has this government done to railways? People will say, oh, the government is, you know, allowing pizza to be delivered on a train, or the government is talking of bullet trains. At some level, do you think there's been misplaced priorities? Because, you know, the Vivek Debroy committee, I'm sort of going back to that because that's the last piece of sort of recommendation. I would, you know, are you disappointed that we've got such great recommendations? Anil Kakotkar committee on safety of railways as well. Not, you know, the follow through hasn't been that good. You know, they haven't been implemented in totality, or at least the substantive part of it hasn't been accepted by the government.
Yeah, so see, I won't touch upon all the recommendations of Vivek Debroy's committee, but I'll answer your point. So see, at times what happens is lot of initiatives that the government has already taken, various aspects that they have already implemented are probably not being highlighted, or are probably not being, you know, communicated in the manner that they should have been. For example, they merged railway budget. So at least, you know, the strong benefit of this is that now the government is in a position to take a unified view of the entire transportation sector. That's a very powerful step. Second, Mr. Suresh Prabhu in his first railway budget actually announced an overall investment of about 8.5 lakh crore rupees over the next 5 years. He clearly articulated in that budget statement that, you know, the problem that railways has is basically because of the huge legacy that we have run into. So, you know, for example, if you see railways networks, there are several sections within Indian Railways which operate more than 120% of capacity, even more than 150% of capacity. And all these operations in such, you know, busy routes have actually safety implications also. So what needs to be done is essentially ensure that the capacity of railways, we need to decongest the existing networks, and we need to enhance the capacity of railway networks. So the various investments have been made, and over the last 3 years, as you mentioned, approximately 1 lakh crore rupees has already been invested in improving the network capacity. So right problems and right solutions have been identified, but the magnitude of you know, the problems is so much that it's taking a bit of time. So we need to highlight what actions have already been implemented. It's not a complete story yet, but substantial progress has already been made, and it will maybe take 3-4 years to actually complete that entire picture. That's my view.
Okay, Maitri, are you convinced that this is going to take just 3-4 years for that entire picture to start looking up, and for that entire picture to convince us that the big picture for the railways is rosy, the big picture for the railways is good going forward? There is political will to reform the railways, and results perhaps will be judged only in the next 3 to 4 years. Are you convinced about that?
Well, not entirely, Supriya, simply because I think, though I agree a great deal with what Mr. Kishore Desai said, and also what Mr. Dinesh Trivedi said, ultimately to me, until such time as your ticket covers the cost, you are never going to be able to break even. And that is true not only for the upper class, but also for the lower classes in terms of fares. Until such time, if you feel there's somebody who just cannot afford to pay that, then you can do something like a DBT. But today that is not the case. All the well-heeled people in Bombay still get huge subsidies on their suburban fare. So to me, whatever rationalization you do in cost, until such time as your tariff covers the cost, you are not going to go anywhere with your railways.
There political will to do that? That's the big question. I'm afraid we are completely run out of time, but I want to thank each one of my panelists. This has been such a wonderful discussion. Dinesh Trivedi, Kishore Desai, Rucharan Das, Dr. Seshadri Chari, Adil Singh, Maithili. Thank you so much for taking time out and putting things in perspective. I understand it's tough to talk about rebooting railways in 1 hour, but this is as much ground as we can cover. Hopefully, we will do another debate soon and get all of you to come up with more specific recommendations as well. Thank you so much for being with us, Supriya.
Indeed. Now, Indian Railways is the 4th largest in the world. It is the largest PSU in the country with disproportionate magnitude of problems, and there is no denying that.
That's right, but like our politician said, it is a mass transport system and can't be devoid of its social responsibility. So how is that balance going to be found, and how can we make railways a self-sustaining, profitable organization? Massive reforms are needed. Will the government have the stomach to go ahead with it? That's the big question we're asking. Thank you so much for being with us on the India Development Debate.
Coming up next is, of course, a special show on the Mumbai rains, how the city has sunk. We get you all the details over the next half an hour.
Find us on Facebook at facebook.com/ETNow and don't forget to click the like button. You can also follow us on Twitter at ETNowLive. To stay updated with all our programming, hit the subscribe button on our YouTube channel by logging on to youtube.com/ETNow.